Hello and welcome to TiElogues Q&A. To tell our viewers in TiElogues Q&A, we invite questions from our members and get an expert in the house to answer them for you. The expert in the house today is Kanika Mathur, and we are focusing on how to brand and market your product or service. Welcome, Kanika. Thank you for joining us
Hi,
today. And we will
nice to be
dive straight into the thank you and we'll dive straight into the questions. How should a creator startup like RTI Wala do the branding? They help individuals and businesses in accessing valuable information and records from the government.
Yeah, I think right to information is really something that I feel very close to because so many times, you don't know what are the real issues and challenges that people have faced and how they can actually figure out what is it. I mean, there's so many things that the government doesn't tell you, and of course it might be available somewhere in some book lying somewhere in a corner or in but you don't know how to get to it.
How
So
to get hold
and
of
then
it?
as a citizen I have a right to know why
No.
something is happening, how it's happening, and what has the government achieved, for instance, as an example.
Hmm.
So, I think it's really important to look at two things. I mean, I always start looking at who is it that I need to talk to, right? So, I think in the case of this RTI Wala, I feel that, there are two target audiences. One is RTI Wala itself. How are they going to be seen as a credible source in the industry? For that, they need to look at all the stakeholders who are involved in these sort of programs of giving information out, right, in the government and so on, and actually help network with them and help be seen as a credible source of information by them as well, right? So here, I think one of the things that I would do is to network and establish relationships with local and national leaders to bring attention to RTI and advocate for changes to improve RTI processes. So that way, you tend to get positioned as an expert in the space who's driving the advocacy, right? And I think the other thing that needs to be done also is I think there's a lot of information that the government is probably giving out, but we don't know who's taken it and what it is, right? So how can we highlight RTI success stories? I think
Hmm.
these are things that will need to be done with stakeholders in participation with and partnership with stakeholders. And of course, I'm sure participating in events and networking forums, etc., will be a big area. So I think one part of the story is how do you become a credible leader by networking with stakeholders? But the other one is really people like me, right? Users. How do you actually talk to users and how do you actually get them to understand that you are a source for information, right? And that's what I understand that you do. So I
Yeah.
think there, I would really look at a focus on customer education, right? How are you going to get people to even know that there's something called right to information, right? I mean, a lot of people don't even know that
That's
that is a
something.
fundamental right, right? So, how do I educate people that, hey, you can ask these questions and here's a forum in which you can ask these questions? That's one. And then, how do you create resources, right? Like maybe webcasts or podcasts or tutorials, etc. How do you actually get people involved? And I think one of the things that I would do is actually get people to participate in campaigns. It's interesting, right? I mean, let's say there are a whole lot of people who really want an answer to a particular issue, right? You can actually create a campaign which is a go to market to actually figure out how these questions are being answered, and you can actually become an activist brand. So I think these are the kind of things that I would do when it comes to the
Creating
kind
that
of
awareness. Mhm.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Kanika. The next question is, my product is an aggregator of fixed return investments, and the service has gone live very recently. The product is a B2C. We are not yet funded and still bootstrapped. What should our approach be to start marketing initially? From which activities should we start, and where should we consider cost constraints?
Yeah, it's a tough one because there are so many financial products that are available in the market today. And so I would start from the basics, right? I would always begin by identifying the core target audience. Who are you selling to? Are you selling to premium investors? Are you selling to, the Janta crowd? Who are you selling to? And why would they buy your product versus so many others that are available in the market? So I mean, the bottom line is that I would like this question to really be answered, because when I know what is the value that you bring to the table, that's when I can actually tell you, hey, spend some money and go to market. So I think the most important thing is to be very clear about what your value offering is, and also look at it from a competitive standpoint, right? There are so many people who are probably selling similar, products, and you need to make sure that your product stands out amongst them. So the first thing is actually identify what is the value that you bring to the table and who your target audience is. Who are you selling to, right? And then you start focusing on reaching your target audience. Right now, I would look at two ways of reaching your target audience. In the financial services industry, I believe affiliates would be a big way of going to market. There are people who are actually brokers and sub brokers and so on, who actually help go to customers, and they have a huge sort of um, number of customers who actually they are talking to, so you could also affiliate with them, right? So that's one. And I think that's a good way when you're bootstrapped, because that means that you're not spending too much on media. You're spending money on connecting with the right stakeholders and telling them what your story is. And by going to market first with them, you'll probably understand what are the challenges that they are facing in selling your product and be able to hone your value proposition better. And then the next step really would be, how do you actually start building your toolkit for marketing, which is how do you actually have a website that makes you stand out? That's one. How do you actually have a social media presence? How do you start attracting people through advertising? So that would be the next step for me. So that I think would be in all the way I would approach it.
Thank you, Kanika. We have more questions coming in, so we will continue this Q&A session next week.